Perfect. And I
Okay.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the show. My name is Christine. I'm a quantum shamanic healer. I'm so excited to have my guest today, Tony Mowry. He goes by the Warrior Healer, and he's trained in Soul Center Healing Hypnosis. I'll just introduce him with his Instagram bio. So he's a medic and RN living in the backwoods, raising food and making mead. I hope that's correct. And I'll just give a little background for those of you who are, who don't know Tony. So I was first introduced to him a few years ago when I was watching JCK on YouTube. She used to have some call-in shows with viewers, and the climate a couple of years ago was a little bit different. And I remember when Tony just came on the show. There was so much like magnetism about him. He just really embodies, in my opinion, like that divine masculine. And his story was very, very interesting. I took notice of it. And then I've been following Tony ever since. And I decided that I just felt like an intuitive pull. I need to talk to this guy. So I invited him to come on to my show. So Tony, welcome. Thanks again for participating. And maybe I'll just open it up for you to give a little background of your story and what you're doing here, and just a little, background for the audience who might not know you yet.
Good. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me, Christine. It might be a long talk if we're going to give my background. I
But
don't
that's
know.
okay.
So my wife is the RN, and
Oh, okay.
I do make mead, which is delicious, absolutely delicious. But it's kind of been put on hold here since I started SCHH. I haven't done much with that. But kind of our plan here is because we have 250 acres in Tennessee, is to have a healing retreat center with good food and good drink and social and the whole thing. But it's going to take a little bit. I got to manifest it first. But to get me to where I got today, or I am today, I was a paramedic for 30 years, which is a long time. I'm so busy with Soul Center Healing Hypnosis now that I actually think that I'm probably just going to let my paramedic license lap because I'm not working anymore. But that was part of my journey to get here, part of the training. I worked on any special team you could think of, SWAT teams. I was on flight teams, critical care teams, disaster response teams, team leaders, and about every one of those things. So there's been quite a lot of training in the medical side and the police law enforcement side of things. But that's got me to what I'm doing now. It was training building me up to this point. Never really realized it. Never thought I would be doing this crazy stuff that I'm doing. But what had got me there was I was getting tired of the medical field, not fixing anybody, not healing anybody. As a medic, I only have them for an hour, maybe up to, but still, they're not recovering. They're not healing from the ailments, the pains, the issues, the diseases that we have. And I always thought there was something different. I knew the medical system was screwed. I knew that our food was not helping us. I knew that there was chemicals and stuff that was introduced that were hindering us, but I knew there had to be something deeper that, people go in for a healing, a treatment, but yet most times get worse, um, not ever recover. They never really actually heal from it. So I always thought there was something different. So that brings me to 2020. It's been 3 years now that the craziness started, the pandemic. And so when that happened, being the medic, I felt this anxiety, this anger, this frustration that I knew that I was not mine. I was never on this spiritual journey before that. I was a preacher's kid, and I just disowned everything to do with religion because I was a preacher's kid. So I never knew anything about the spiritual side of things. I believed in God, but I didn't know. I always thought that um, if I was going to die, because my the religion that I was in or brought up in was pretty strict. So if you didn't repent, you were going to go to hell, and it was awful. But that has a lot of trauma associated with that. So I didn't realize why I was anxious and frustrated and angry about the issues going on, because I had nothing to be fearful about, nothing to worry about. Even as a medic, I really didn't care. I'm like, man, whatever. We've done this before. Um, so then I started thinking about it. I'm like, well, shoot, I'm tapped into everybody else's feelings that are going on right now. I'm connected to everybody else, and I'm feeling their issues. And so that sent me down a path of um, watching things. I mean, videos would pop up in my YouTube feed or anywhere that I needed to see. And it just kept taking me down the path I needed to do to get me to where I am today. I think the first thing that was just a huge revelation for me was watching. Um, there was a guy uh, named Aaron Abkey that did um, a talk on the law of one, Course in Miracles, those channelings and the such. I didn't know how really to believe in channelings or to what to think about channelings, because the way I was brought up in religion. But when he explained the law of one, and when he explained those different channelings, I I I think I had a revelation. I had an aha moment. I mean, I was listening to those. I was shouting. I was crying. I was laughing. I'm like, holy cow! I've been, not lied to, but I've been misled. This is not the way it is. We, um, we just been kept in the dark and controlled. So then that led me further, and so I started tapping in and listening to these videos, and I got on frequency. And I think when you talked about that call-in show with JC, I was going through that time, that transition,
Mm,
and I had just signed up for the course by David Hoss through Soma Energetics to do their phase 1 and phase 2 training for using tuning forks to do tunings and frequency adjustments. So
mm,
I started studying into that, um, and was doing that, but it still wasn't what I was supposed to be doing completely yet. So I kept searching and kept searching for the reason why. What's a deep rooted problem that is causing our ailments and disease that we're not seeing? And I come across Dolores Cannon with her quantum healing hypnosis therapy, QHHT. And I started watching everything of Dolores Cannon. And then I thought about doing the training for QHHT, but being that we were in the pandemic, you couldn't do it online through her training. Um, and they never talked about entities either.
mhm,
So watching watching her stuff, and then I come across Alba Weinman, which she started doing entity removal, and I was watching all of her sessions. I'm like, this is what I need. It's past life. It's things that happened in our past lives that are causing the issues we have, the pent up trauma, the emotional trauma that we incur in this incarnation and other incarnations builds up, and it's stored there, and which then manifests into the physical. And so then I was watching Heather Hink, and she was doing beyond quantum healing hypnosis, which that's another version. That's what I trained in. I decided that's what I was going to go do. I was going to go train and be a quantum or beyond quantum healing hypnosis practitioner. And I started out in that, and we could do things in the online spaces, which we needed at that time. But I was only doing it on friends and family, so I really wasn't getting much traction with
mm,
getting a lot of people or helping a lot of people. And one of the things that really um, stifled it was I did 2 sessions on my wife, and each session she I get her in past life regression to a dirt road street in some old town. One was a Western town, another one was a Swiss village. And she was on this dirt road street and she couldn't advance any further to see what she needed to see today. She felt like this dark um, thing on her chest, like sitting on her chest. And of course, I didn't know what to do with entities. This was an entity, this was something they're blocking. So the only thing I knew to do was flood white light into it. Ooh wee, that just pissed it off. So she became really anxious, sweating profusely, um, and was telling me that she needed to come out of the hypnosis. And you're not really under when you're in hypnosis, but you're in that trance state. I'm sure you probably talked about that many times.
Mhm.
Um, so I brought her up, and I'm like, oh, there's something I need yet on top of this. And so about that time, Heather Hink was starting to do entity release, and she talked about this lady, Laura, that she learned how to do this from. So watching her sessions, I was listening to how she was releasing entities. I'm like, I need this training. I need to figure out how to release entities because I keep running into blocks on the people that I put in the hypnosis that's keeping them from going on a journey and seeing what they need to see to heal. And so, and about that time, then I saw Laura on a entity release or an entity show, podcast, whatever it was. It was a YouTube show. And I'm like, there's the lady. That's who I need. And so I immediately, talked to her and I signed up and took her Soul Center Healing Hypnosis. And, then the rest is kind of, that's where I'm at now. We're doing entity release on clients under hypnosis, healing tons and mass amount of people. And I never really thought I'd be doing this. Um, I'm basically a hostage negotiator, a, a demon slayer, demon alchemizer, whatever you want to call it, soul rescuer. So everything that I ever trained in prior to this with in the medic field and the police department field prepared me for doing this. And
Yeah.
I get told on a regular basis they don't like my beard. They know who I am. They don't like my beard. They don't like anything about me. And I just say, laugh and say, I know, but I'm here to help you anyway. I love you too.
Yeah. Wow, what an amazing story. Thanks for sharing, Tony. Yeah, I think that's kind of like a normal trajectory to people who kind of start to walk the path of healer, especially more in the like energetic and etheric realms. It's not like when we're a child, it's like, what do you want to do? Oh, I want to like release entities and demons, right? It kind of just like spirit kind of puts us on our path. And I really, yeah, I feel like the medic background is like a huge asset to what you're bringing to the table. And it was so okay, there's a couple of things that we can like deconstruct for the audience, and like obviously we're gonna be lighthearted about this. Like there's nothing to be afraid of. These entities, they're around you, whether you think you believe in them or not, it still is. And I think most of the audience here is pretty okay with that. Um, okay, so I guess the first place I want to take it is um, I really liked the link that you made about, okay, so first of all, how would someone get an entity? Let's start there. What are the ways that someone can get an entity?
Yeah, and like you said, there's no fear about this. These things have been with us for a long time. We just never
Mhm,
knew they were there, the unseen. Um, and so they're there, and they've always been there. They're just coming to the surface now because we got to release them.
mhm,
So, this life is set up for trauma right in the womb. As soon as you hit the ground running, it's set up for trauma. The childbirth is trauma, fear and trauma, control and trauma. Um, so us as human, we're in this human experience. We're light being, we're eternal light beings living out a temporary human existence in an earth suit, an electrical earth suit to boot.
mhm, mhm,
And and so they set it up for trauma right from the very get-go. And I talked a little bit about me being a preacher's kid. So religion was the first control mechanism, or believe maybe possibly the first control mechanism to keep people in fear, to keep people at a lower vibratory state.
Mhm.
So as we go through this human existence, we have our ups and downs. We have our low vibrations where we're angry, we're fearful, trauma, something happened to you, uh, and you store it. That opens up or causes a tear in your auric field, which allows anything of low vibration, because that's where you're vibrating at. Everything is in frequency and vibration. So those lower vibrational things can get to you and can attach to you. Now, for the earthbound spirits, most of the times they're just trying to help, but because they come out of the human body in a low vibratory state with emotional trauma, that's where they're still at. They're stuck in a stasis. And when they attach to you, then they're bringing all their emotional baggage with them. Everything, every pain, everything that ever bothered them, they're bringing it with them. They have it with them. Now, the demons, and I don't really like to call them demons because they're really not demons, but it sounds cool to say a demon slayer. Um, they are, vibrating low, and they're put there and placed or created to keep you in that low vibratory state. So the only way that they can attach you is when you're in those low states caused by trauma, emotional issues, and then they attach to you, and they are there to keep your light down, to keep you from bringing more light into the world, to keep your vibration, your frequency down, to cause ill will, to make you sick. Uh, they're there to do all that, but they just been deceived and lied to do that job. So they're just lost from light.
Yeah, okay, so maybe before we get into how we can get the entity, maybe we should talk about the different types of entities.
Hmm.
So I've been listening to you and Laura Whitward, and I really appreciate and enjoy her methodology and how she explains it. It's very, very similar to my training.
Hmm.
So in my training, we categorize entities in three ways. So it could be the deceased person, which is the earthbound spirit. It could be a negative emotion like directed at you, or thought forms that can become obsessive.
Hmm.
And then out of those three, they could be, well, obviously like the earthbound spirit is sentient, but for the emotions and thought forms, they could be sentient or non-sentient. So the non-sentient is more of like the benign, like how it starts, and then like kind of left unchecked, and when it becomes like more obsessive, and then you kind of feed like your own trauma to it, and it kind of can almost take on a life of its own,
Hmm.
and that's when it would become sentient. And another aspect that in my training, it's about we call it sorcery or like bad medicine. So what is sorcery? It's like something negative directed at you. It
Hmm.
could be like it could be like people that are gossiping about you. It could be like someone imposing their will on you. It could be like, i.e. prayer. You can always offer blessings, but the prayer, we start to get a little bit on a gray area. It could be like the cancel culture. It could be things like that. And just how we have like manifestation, right? Like thought plus feeling plus emotion, that's how we manifest in the positive.
Hmm.
Thought plus feeling plus emotion from someone else directed at you, it's like that can also be how these entities get in. That's another layer of my understanding. And then I think, yeah, and then if you wanted to elaborate more, because I think you're kind of getting at the same thing. You have the earthbound spirits, and then you have kind of, I guess some people talk about, is a AI, or it's kind of like this these little gremlins that have kind of been like reprogrammed to like keep us more subdued and not reaching our full potential with our light. So that's another aspect. If you wanted to like elaborate more on that, like
Hmm.
what are would you agree kind of like what I'm saying and what
Oh
you're
yeah.
saying? Let's just kind of define what they are, and then we can get into more about how we could get them. Yeah, I would agree. It's also through the trauma. So that you have the trauma, crack in the auric field. Everything passes through the aura first, then
Hmm.
it goes through the mental body, then the emotional body, and then left unchecked. That's when we get into the physical body, which is where we get the dis-ease, right? Like
Hmm.
the pain, the physical ailments that don't go away with the
Hmm.
traditional medicine because they're just treating the physical body.
Yeah, and I think before we talk about
Yeah.
the different entities and
Hmm.
how and what they are, because
Hmm.
I come across something new every day, I think.
Hmm.
It's absolutely an incredible journey for me, because the things that I find are, if I could see stuff out of these two eyes of what's on people, they would look pretty funny. Uh, I'm pretty sure. But one thing, I touched on this before about the electrical body,
Yeah, yeah,
and
that's
and
interesting.
so and so let's tie it back to how these entities and stuff affect us. So
Hmm.
if you look at this is an electrical earth suit, and we have our flow of electricity. We're grounded to the earth. We're connected to source, or God, however you want to view it, and we're a conduit. And so that energy has to flow. And it's even in the medical caduceus, and this is my opinion on it, that the medical caduceus is the way the electrical system is designed in the body, because where the two negative and positive snakes cross, where they cross that center pole, that's your chakra points. That center pole, if anybody knows anything about electricity, that's your neutral wire. It goes up and down the spine. And those negative and positive snakes are your not negative and positive, your yin and yang, your male and female, and where they cross is that chakra point. So if you have a blockage, a stored emotional trauma, an entity, anything that's attached there in any one of those points in in that flow, it ends up being like a kinked wire,
Hmm.
a broken or a kinked wire, where the flow kind of impacts it like a dam, a breakage, and it builds up, and then it will manifest into the physical as form as, and uh, um, ailments or
Hmm.
diseases and stuff like that.
And in
So,
your experience, what are the common types of ways that it presents specifically, like physical ailments? What are the, like if someone comes to you with an ailment, what's a telltale sign that it could be an entity for you?
well, anywhere there's pain,
Mhm.
and a lot of it's in the personal history too, because we have them fill out a client form that they fill out all their history. So any traumas where maybe sexual abuse, we're going to be looking for something in the sacral region, because
Mhm.
that's your command center. Anything that probably that happened to you before you're 7 years old could be something in the root, your stability and your security. um, Anything in your stability, anything that happens to you emotional wise, that a death of a loved one, a close loved one, or something like that, or something that rocked your stability and security, we'd look at the root. Um, Addictions, a lot of times those are in the solar plexus chakra.
Mhm.
Anything affecting your joy would be your solar plexus, because that's your no, that's not your joy. Sacral is your joy, your creativity, your joy, and your sensuality. Your solar plexus is your self-esteem, your confidence. It's your inner power.
Mhm.
So a lot of times, if they have addictions, we'll see something in the solar plexus. Um, uh, there's not too many that are ever in the root in the heart area, because entities other than maybe earthbounds, we find earthbounds there. Other entities other than earthbounds can't stand to be in that heart energy. Um, we'll find AI or implants, etheric AI or implants in the heart energy, like devices in that heart. But the demons or the lost from light entities can't stand to be in that energy of the heart.
It's
So,
interesting. It's interesting you bring up the heart, just because that's the name of my business, Higher Heart Healing, and that name was like given to me in 2019. And for the first couple of years of my business, I was focusing more on the tarot card readings. So I was like, I don't really understand this name. Why am I using this name? It doesn't really talk about what I do. And I was given kind of like the, the image of the heart with like the infinity through it.
mhm.
And now I've been having like more and more different like awarenesses about how the heart is so important and how it really is the gateway. Um, and I've also been told that every trauma passes through the heart first, and then it will kind of land in one of those other chakras, like, the lower ones, talking
Mhm.
about addictions and the trauma, or yeah, addictions and trauma. And then more in the higher ones, I would say it's more about suppressing the intuition and the higher consciousness.
Hmm.
Um, and then for me, when I do energy healing, sometimes I often find, because it's interesting, sometimes spirit will show you things through your lens of how you would understand something, or sometimes that's actually what it looks like, but I think it's kind of a blend of both. And a lot of times when people have that, I also kind of focused a lot on my healing with people that were kind of going through traumatic relationships,
Hmm.
that kind of a thing. And I would often see it in the heart space as almost like three like needles or pins in the heart.
Hmm.
Like in the tarot, that's depicted with the Three of Swords kind of card, that heartbreak kind of energy. So I just found that interesting how you said that the entities don't stay in the heart. Like I would add to that, I feel like maybe, yeah, you could have like the wound in the heart, but then the entity, depending on how much healing you've done on the wound, would kind of show where it's showing up in the body, and then that would kind of be the beacon maybe for the entity to come in.
Hmm. Hmm.
But yeah, and that
I see.
addiction point is the addiction point is very, very interesting,
Hmm.
because you could also, that's why I'm finding this alcohol thing is so interesting, because it's like, first of all, if you just kind of look at it, okay, how come that's the legal one and everything else, like plant medicine, is not legal, right? Like, how come alcohol is glorified? How come alcohol is associated with like celebration? How come alcohol is such a part ingrained in our culture?
Hmm.
And it's 2 points, because just how like the you can elaborate on this, like how the different entities based on the addiction, whether it's like alcohol or like an opioid or a heroin or something like that, they can show up differently. The different substances that people use, which are kind of just a coping mechanism to the trauma, it's like that tells a story too. So like, out of all the substances, why does someone choose alcohol versus an opioid? Why does someone choose these different things? Because you can track that, you can track back their substance, their addiction substance, also to the type of wounding or trauma that they have.
Hmm.
So like, my understanding is that alcohol is tied in more to um like low self-worth, like we're filling that void. The opioids are more tied into mother's love. So if they have that mother wound, abandonment,
Hmm.
that's usually one. Um, the cocaine can be more like low self-esteem, like I want that fault, that I want that artificial confidence.
Hmm.
So just things like that. And then we can also compound this by, let's say we do have an alcohol addiction and we are spending lots of times in bars. Well, that's kind of like a hot spot for these earthbound spirits that could have either been alcoholics themselves or passed that way. And then so it's kind of like this cycle of continuing the addiction, feeding the addiction through the attachment with the entity who has the addiction. And
Hmm.
it's like, what came first, the chicken or the egg, right? So I'm not sure if you could touch more on that, because I find the addiction component to it is so interesting. And also, when we consume alcohol, we're also lowering our vibration, we're lowering our defenses. Like, it's more, because it's twofold, right? We have the wound, and then we also have to have the ability with the weakened aura
Hmm.
for the entity to get in, and alcohol can weaken our aura.
Hmm.
So I find that interesting.
It's all interesting, and there's infinite
Yeah,
possibilities. You touched a
yeah,
bit on the earthbounds, because there's a lot that has affected people's addiction. Like all of a
hmm,
sudden they were fine, and then all of a sudden they had a wounding or something happened, emotional trauma. They then all of a sudden have an addiction to something. And it's
hmm,
usually they had that wounding, that trauma, an earthbound entity was able to get in there, which died of an addiction, that same addiction. And the only way, since they don't have a physical vehicle anymore, the only way to get that fix is to get it through you.
hmm.
And so, and that's I think that's part of the reason why alcohol's put out there, because it allows for that to happen
Exactly.
easily and keep you in that lower vibration.
Yeah.
Um, where was I going with that? Uh, I forget where I was going with that. I think I lost my point on it. But
And
so
there's
there,
also, yeah.
but if we heal the emotional trauma that happened, the wounding that happened, like you
Hmm,
said, heroin addiction was more tied to the mother issues or wounding from the mother. If we can heal that emotional trauma and seal that back up and seal it tight, and then remove the entities that might have got in there, then they will have the choice that they could just give up on that addiction again, because the need for it isn't there anymore. We fixed the wounding that happened and occurred. We removed the entities that were causing the urge to go, get the stuff, and so then they can heal. I think that's where we were going with it.
Yeah, and
What?
let's talk about more about that. So what could clients, maybe you can explain a little bit about your process. So a client, presents themselves with you, either, they could be aware of their emotional trauma, or they might just have this, physical ailment they want to get rid of,
Mhm.
or, you know, they crossed your path somehow. So what's the process with the session? Like, what's the process that you do with them?
So, um, well, we're bringing them into hypnosis, which,
Mhm.
hypnosis has the misnomer that it's terrible or bad. Stage hypnosis. You're not really under anything. You're just in a deep meditative, relaxed state. Um, you're completely conscious and aware. That's the misnomer, is that
Mhm.
you're under and you don't remember anything, but you choose anything that happens to you in hypnosis. So we would bring them into that state of hypnosis, that deep, relaxed, meditative state. We When we do the induction, we scan down the body. When we relax them down, we send white light over the body, which brings up entities, the issues, which most of the stuff we got through their paperwork to begin with. So we know where exactly we need to look, that there might possibly be something.
Mhm.
Um, and so that white light brings up those entities. They'll bring up pain, little prings, prangs, feelings. It'll bring up feelings as well, emotional blockage, and then we'll focus on that, and we'll start a conversation with it, and we'll find out why it's there, how it got there, what's it doing there, how it's affecting you. If it's an earthbound, we find out what happened to them when on their, when they had a human body, what caused them to come out of it. If it's a loss from light entity, we find out why or who put them there and when they were able to attach to the client. So that way, and that's a really important one, is finding out when they attach. So the client or the person can associate with that at the time. At what point in their life did this happen? So they know what kind of state that they were in that this happened. So they know how better to protect themselves in the future, uh,
Mhm.
which is really important. And you'll find that their biggest protection is keeping your frequency high, letting your internal light shine. Because once you're shining that light and feeling out of the heart space and sending out that love energy, there is nothing in this realm that can get to you. They cannot even touch you. So that's why it's so important to find out what and when they came. Um, and then we end up finding out their story and what they're doing there. And once we find out their story and they realize that they don't have to be doing this any longer, they're more than happy to go. They're excited to go in most cases. Now you'll have some occasional ones that refuse to alchemize back home to the light. Um, Never the earthbounds, because they're ready to go. But
Yeah.
you're lost from light entities. There is an occasional, not very many, but there's an occasional one or two that won't turn or won't alchemize back to light, go back home, and we just have the angels take care of them and remove them off and take them where they need to go, because it is a free will universe. They still have a choice to stay in the darkness if they want, um,
Mhm.
but they cannot be in the client any longer, because that's not the client's choice. So we remove them. Um, yeah.
And I love that because oftentimes like the depictions of entity extraction, like in the movies or media, it's like exorcism, or it's like, a priest, and I'm gonna, do this, and it's a big traumatic thing. And no, it's more about, like, these entities are also part of source. They're just polarized in the negative.
Mhm.
We are just like, they need healing just like we need healing. And I love how you're bringing, like, the love and the compassion and the healing and the awareness, like both to the client and also to the entity, and taking them to the light with the angels. In my session, we do very, very similar, but we use, the ancestors, they do their thing. We call them into sacred space, and then they will take the entity to the,
Hmm.
we call it the upper world, like the higher realms, but it's the same thing, the light. So I really like how there's that healing component for all parties involved, and we're not doing any harm, especially with the deceased loved ones, because a lot of times it can be a loved one, right? So like if someone came to you for advice and help in the physical world, they might come to you for advice and help in the spiritual world. And also, um, people who do this work, we're kind of prone for the entity attachment a little bit more, just because the entity knows, like, if it's attached to me, there's a higher chance that it'll probably get sent to the light, because I do these sessions and I receive these sessions on a regular basis, as opposed to someone who maybe doesn't.
Hmm.
And there's also like, I liked the piece that you had about bringing the client's awareness to their state of their life when this happened, as a tool or a reminder of what to do protection wise to keep it from happening again.
Hmm.
Because that's the other aspect, right? Like, we can release all the entities we want, but if there's no changes to your lifestyle or your mentality or your protection, you're just going to get they're just going to reattach to you, right? So
Hmm.
that's another important aspect that I liked, that you brought up as well.
Hmm. Yeah,
Mhm.
we have to heal the wounding that occurred that
Mhm.
allowed the things in the first time. And if we don't heal that, you're not going to get the same entity back.
Mhm.
You're going to get other ones. But
Mhm.
it's really important to do that healing, um, you know, as well once we take those off. And that's why, if anybody's ever watched any of my sessions, we're bringing in healing light when we take off an entity. I'm usually striking a tuning fork to signify that color energy coming in and filling that space and healing it and that trauma that occurred that caused that wounding in the first place. Uh,
Mhm.
so um, there was another point that you had said that it just slipped my mind. So I guess it wasn't important.
It'll come back.
I was gonna say something about it. And now I can't. I just slipped my mind. So
About the bringing them to the light.
no, it wasn't about bringing the light. It was about you were talking about. Um, it'll come to me. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
Let's go.
Okay, we'll get it. Okay. Yeah, so then, um, so what are some telltale signs that someone may have an entity
Hmm.
besides the physical pain?
Well, I guess, and that's where the history is the biggest part. The what is put down on their client form,
Mhm.
they how they act. Like we talked about this before too, is all of a sudden you have someone that didn't have addictions to anything, all of a sudden does have addictions to things. Someone all of a sudden causing self-harm to themselves where everything was fine before. That's another indication. I actually have quite a long list of signs that you might have an entity, and I have it on most of my YouTube channels in the description. Um, but it's quite a detailed list. So pretty much everybody has entities out there or attachments from that list, because I mean it's so long. There's so many things that are there. It's hard to even pinpoint. There's not just a few things. It's like looking at the whole entire lifetime of a person, what happened to them, how they grew up, how they were raised. I know what a while back I was going to say this, and it was really important on my journey. Um, and we were talking about the energetic body. So I have an example of how this stuff affects us. And it wasn't that it was an entity, it was the fact of how I was raised as a kid and that emotional trauma that I didn't know I had from being raised really strict religion, where I had, this, I had a pain in my back. Of course, I always wrote it off to being a paramedic and lifting people all the time. I mean, it's just constant pain in my back, constant pain in my back. And when I had that realization where everything that I was taught was not entirely true, and I was not worried about whether or not I died. Um, that fear of death had disappeared. Um, and once I realized all that wounding, that emotional trauma that happened that I didn't even know I had, that back pain disappeared too, was completely gone that same day.
Wow.
As I was jumping around shouting and laughing and crying and that whole deal, I'm like, holy cow, I don't have any back pain anymore. So, and your back is your root, your stability, your security, and because that in your belief system. And so since that I had such a heavy wounding with the belief system that I was programmed with, that as soon as I realized that wasn't the way, or that wasn't right completely, then it just disappeared. That was really incredible.
Wow.
So I figured I better say that once that just finally popped in my mind. Um, but I forget now what we were talking about.
Yeah, and it's also because that was my question too. Like earlier on in my training, I was like, okay, so I believe in this. I believe in these entities. Like I believe they can, cause physical ailments. But what about the toxic environment? Like what about, if people are putting toxins in their body and that's happening to us, you know, by like just because of the world we live in, even if we're not consuming the toxins, we're still kind of having them in our environment.
Hmm.
How do you explain that aspect of the physical ailments? And then my understanding is that it can act as an amplifier. So like the root of everything would be would be an emotional trauma. Then the entities can kind of compound that. And then the toxins can like compound that even more. And that has to make sense because have you can have people that have like a completely unhealthy lifestyle, like drinking, smoking, all this stuff, and they have no physical problems. And then you can have someone who has a completely healthy lifestyle, picture of health, and then they have all of these physical problems.
Hmm.
So why? And mainstream medical can't explain that, right?
Hmm.
They'll say, oh, it's genetics or this and that. But for me, that is kind of like that kind of that explains why there's a missing piece, right?
Hmm.
So
Hmm. And that's why on most of my YouTube's, strengthening mind, body, and spirit, because
mhm,
that triad has to be balanced. It's really important. And our thoughts are powerful too. We
mhm,
um we create a lot of this stuff for us too by the way we're thinking.
mhm,
Um, and so even in our sessions, so when we're removing stuff like this, we're healing from the emotional trauma, the things that are have wounded us. People are able to reframe the thoughts that come into their head, um, that are put there, placed there, or wherever they come from. But they can reframe them and twist them and change it into a positive, which causes more healing.
mhm,
So it's important to balance everything. We need to balance the light and the dark. We need to balance the mind, body, and spirit. We need to keep everything in balance so that energy can flow. And if one thing is out of whack, then you're not going to heal from it. So the toxins in the air affect us. The toxins in our food and water affect us. And so that's one of those aspects. You got to take good food in to the system. Your nutrition is really important,
mhm.
because it's going to still affect you. And the whole thing is just so important to balance. I don't think that answered your question, but
No, that's always a good reminder though.
it is a good
Balance,
reminder.
healthy lifestyle. Yeah, the consumption, that the whole mindset and manifestation piece is huge. Consciousness is our biggest commodity. That's why there's like a battlefield for our consciousness.
Hmm.
And right now I just find it so it's just so like blatantly obvious now. And it's interesting because I've really like detached from all of it. So sometimes like I'll kind of hear something and oh, there's so many things happening right now. I'm like, is there? Not in my reality.
Same here too. And you were talking, and you had said this about entities and stuff when we were talking about entities, and we need to go back into that and talk about them
Mhm,
too, what could be on, because
mhm,
we went and talked about the energetic body. um so thought form entities, I'm finding that a lot,
mhm,
that we create thought form entities. We could either send it to somebody else because we're speaking ill of someone. It would go as the form kind of like black magic, but
Mm-hmm.
we are such powerful creator beings that we can actually create entities.
Mm-hmm.
They are of the lightest source. They have a spark of source in them. We created them. We created them to do ill will to somebody, or you could do that for yourself. You can create entities or beings to help protect you, which after a while they start hindering you, because they're not doing what they're supposed to do. They're protecting you, but they're not keeping you from opening your heart space and balancing and doing all the things you need to do. So those thought form
Yeah,
entities are pretty amazing that we can create them.
and that's a good point. That's another aspect of my training that I do sometimes. So we call it the inner saboteur or the inner sorcerer.
Hmm.
So inner saboteur is, it's based on your wounding and it's trying to keep you safe, right? So it's that voice inside of your head that says, you know, you can't do that, you're not good enough. It could be like a program that you heard as a child or from an authority figure, and then it just kind of like is always there and it's like sabotaging you from living your full potential. And then so we can remove that in our sessions with, we call it journeys. So it's the same thing. Trance state, enter a different reality, meet
Hmm.
it. Where did it come from? What does it want? Extract it. And then the other form is inner sorcerer, which would be along the lines of the black magic directed towards yourself. That one's a little bit more tricky because that one is not acting out of love to protect you. It's just, it actually just wants to cause harm.
Hmm.
But it's the same process. You know, we find it. What do you want? Like, let's send it to the light, get the healing. Um, so yeah, and I find that interesting because you can have, um, I find the wounding can present in two ways. So you have, because how people talk and how they act and how they interact with other people is a very good indication of their relationship with themselves, right? So if someone's always in conflict with other people or like highly judgmental of others, it's a reflection of how their relationship with themselves. So you can have the people that are more aspected towards outside, like they're judgmental on other people, they gossip, they do all that. Or you can have it the other way where it's very much like a self-hatred, like it's like the negative self-talk to themselves.
Hmm.
Either or, it's just an aspect of wounding, right? So as we heal ourselves and we heal our wounding, that type of behavior will dissipate, which is just good for everyone. It's good for you and it's good for the other people that we could be unintentionally doing harm with. And that's interesting because even in, like, I don't know if you've kind of experienced it now, or now you have the words for it, just like in your daily life, like when you sometimes when we have these difficult confrontations with people, you're just like, wow, like that was like a recent example for me. You know, Saturday morning, the parking lot is jam packed, no parking space. I've already done the like 10-minute wrap, like, you know, drive by, can't find a parking spot. I finally find a parking spot and it was very much like a judgment call, right? Like there was two empty spots, me and another car, and then a third car came up. So the first car took the first spot. And then for the second spot, it was between me and another person. And I thought it was very 50-50. It could have been either of ours. And I happened to be closer. So I went in. And then first we got the honk on the horn, okay. And then the woman came out of her car. She was irate. She was banging on my windows. She was screaming at me. This was so rude. This is my spot. How dare you? And I'm just like, wow. I'm like, is that an entity? Like, it's almost like something got triggered. So a trigger can be someone is, you feel like they're violating a boundary. So in her mind, that was her spot, and I violated that boundary. But it was just so interesting because I'm like, okay, like I'm not gonna fight you over a spot. I'll move. Like it was, you know, like, but it could have went the other way, right? So she could have lashed out at me. She could have triggered me. I could have lashed back out at her, and then it's just like we're both sending this like negative sort like a, you know, energy towards each other. So I just like, so there's just examples of that that we find like in our everyday life that um I think that that could be examples of entities in my opinion.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
There's infinite possibilities.
yeah.
Now, I'm sure that you probably heard me before is shooting my love arrows at people and things that trigger me.
Yeah.
It's a good practice to get it to, because they just change. You can see them
Mhm.
change. It's just pretty great. You shoot a love arrow with an exploding tip that has love glitter all over it, and it just gets all over them and every crack and crevice, and they can't help it.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a
So,
good reframe.
but yeah, so it could be entities. I mean, it could be, there's so many things that affect us. The unseen affects us so much. I don't have the gift of sight, so I don't see entities, but there are some clients that actually see things and they can see the entities on them. You can tell sometimes, looking at somebody, their eyes, they just don't look right. They're just dark behind them. There's no sparkle, there's no twinkle, there's no, the lights, the drapes are drawn, but there's no one home. So yeah, all indicators for entities. Um, so and I just don't know until I get in there in a hypnosis session or get them in that state that I can actually find out what the issues are.
Mhm.
And it's absolutely incredible to see what's there. So yeah.
Yeah,
But
interesting.
we keep talking about entities. Let's talk a bit
Yeah.
about the different entities that we've come across. And like I said before, we have thought form entities that were created either by black magic or sending ill will to somebody. Um, we have black magic that is on people, that is sent. It usually looks like uh, a drape or shroud or something, or symbols could be even black magic on the person's energetic or etheric body. Um, and then you have your loss from light entities, the demons that were created to do ill will to people, to keep people in that lower vibrational state. Um, you have, uh, and even some of those have all been lied to and deceived into doing this job.
Yeah.
I've rescued a few dark angels that were lied to and deceived, and when they were released, they got their armors back, their wings unfold, and they're this huge, amazing being of light once we alchemize to the light. And it's just like rescuing your brother or sister from helping them out. And then we have our earthbounds, which you know this realm, the earthbounds get stuck in this state because they come out of the human body. They didn't feel like they had enough time here yet. It was too soon. They're not worthy to go to the light. They're angry. They're frustrated. Uh, they want revenge because of the traumatic thing that happened to them. Or you got your thing with addictions, that they overdosed on something and they come out of the human body, and so they're still stuck in that state, wandering around. And like I said, most times they're there to help, but I've actually come across earthbounds that once they come out of the human body, they didn't know where to go. They were confused. They were met by a darker entity and
Mm.
lied to and convinced into doing something, in order for them to go back to their family or come back. They were promised something. Um, so, and it's pretty incredible what I find, because they first come across as a demon. As I'm talking to them, and then I usually have the angels show them or give them a message of what they're gonna see when they change and alchemize to the light, and they continue on their journey, what they're gonna see, and then they'll see family. I'm like, oh, so you had a human body before. And
Oh,
then it's interesting how they were deceived or conned into doing that, which is absolutely incredible.
interesting.
So
Yeah,
then,
and that yeah. And that also aligns with like if you're of the everything of the light, it's like we're using what's already inside of us because we're all light inside.
mhm,
But then when we're acting more on from the dark side, it's because it's external, right? So a promise of something
mhm,
that makes us do things that are not the best, but it's a external thing, right? And that's what they say, deal with the devil or whatever. Like that's the blackmail thing. Oh well, I'll give you this, but there's a cost for it, and then you're just kind of in this cycle. So it's interesting how that happens in the etheric world with the entities and the
Hmm.
earthbound spirits as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And, and as I said before, especially with the earthbounds, they're stuck in that stasis when they come out of the body. So they're carrying all that baggage, all that pain with them. And most times they're trying to help because they're in the same state that they were. You are in the same state that they were when they come out of the human body. So they're trying to help so you don't go down that same path, but yet they're bringing all that emotional baggage with them. So it doesn't really help. It hinders, it weighs you down. The older you get through life, you get more and more weighted down. Things are more and more difficult. You feel like you can't move, your back hurts, you just feel like you can't move anywhere, you can't do anything, you don't know what you're supposed to do. And it's just all the stuff that is brought in. And some of the lost from light entities we have, you know um, beings with tentacles that are there and attached, and they're grabbing energy as they're walking by and bringing it in to bring in more weight for you, to give you more problems.
Wow.
And so it's really crazy what we see. And then we have our AI, or artificial intelligence, that is there, and that can be in, we're talking etheric um, AI, and that can be introduced in many different ways. And of course, we actually have physical AI that's physically in the body, that's put there by things that we ingested or put into our body. Um, so when we're doing these sessions, we're removing the etherical AI or the energetic AI and implants, but it's important to do a cleanse afterwards to remove any of the physical aspects of that, and get that out of the body.
Hmm.
So, uh, I should we go into AI a little bit more, because that
Yeah, I feel like I'm just keeping a track on the time. We're at about an hour.
oh, well,
Yeah,
you
maybe
just
we.
go, you just take it where you want to go. Where do you want to go with this?
Well, we can touch on that AI quickly, and then maybe we can wrap up in a few minutes. If
Okay.
that's good with you. Yeah.
So, so we have our AI, which is as you know it, and that gets introduced to us by the tech we're using, by different things, gets put into the body. It's not organic. It doesn't belong here in this universe. Um, so it was left in here. I don't know when. I, I could never answer that for sure, but it was brought into the universe because they're trying to switch people over, make them not as human.
Hmm.
So, and that gets introduced, like it could be introduced physically in the stuff we eat, ingest, what's put in our body, or we could pick it up from technology or things that are around us. It's there. And so it's important to put your protections on, because, we're in a business now that we're online all the time using devices. And until we get switched over to good technology, or we switch it over to good technology where it's not affecting us, we got to make sure we put our protections up around us. um, Games, movies,
And
and
what's
the such.
some protection that people can do every day?
Well, and it's usually individual for the person, what works best for the person. But
Hmm.
what we find is, actually I have one on YouTube where she was a TV productions manager, so she was around devices and technology all the time. She was told that all she needs to do, because the infinity symbol is not was not been inverted or taken over, she could put the infinity symbol over every one of her technologies, and to keep her protected. Um, like we talked before, our thoughts are powerful. So anything we envision protecting us, it will be. And so it is. That's why we say it. And so it
Hmm.
is, because it is if whatever we envision, whatever we focus our intention on, it will protect us. So you could envision bubbles of protection around you, around your devices, to make sure that there's no portals opened up or no entities are coming through. Um, and your house, you can put it around your house, pyramids, bubbles, whatever you want to envision.
Hmm.
Um, and it's, since I look like a Viking warrior, I'm always envisioning, putting on my shiny armor, carrying my shield of belief, my sword of truth, and carrying my love bow, because you can't forget that. And then surrounded myself with six bubbles of protection, so there's nothing that's going to get to me. and shining that internal light out. So those are all ways to protect you, because your thoughts and intentions are powerful.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I like how you said that it could be specific to the person, because that ties into the belief, right? So, like, if I'm someone who doesn't believe in bubbles of protection, well, I'm not going to use bubbles of protection, right?
Mhm.
So it's because your belief is the added, ingredient that's going to make it work or not work.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, and there's also another one for me is the sea salt bath. So not Epsom salt, because that brings the energy into the body, but sea salt releases the energy. So
Mhm.
you could do that as a protocol, like once a week, or especially after you receive a healing session, because we want to release any of the residual um, toxins or energy that's in the auric field, and the sea salt is like the best way to do that.
Mhm.
So that's part of my protocol as well.
Yeah, and that was actually touched on in that video that I shared, where she had a lot of AI on her. And
Mm-hmm.
and I think we asked the question, why was the AI not as affecting her as bad as it should have been?
Mm-hmm.
And she was told the sea salt bath she always took,
There
because
you
it
go.
it transmutes it, draws it out, and
Yeah.
disables it. So yeah, sea salt
Yeah.
bath is really important. So grounding. It's so important to get sea salt bath.
And the nature too. I think the trees really
Hmm.
cleanse and heal.
Yes, absolutely.
Um, yeah. So that was, is there any last things you wanted to touch on or bring up,
And
talk about?
talking about nature, that's brought up so often, that we need to get back to nature and grounding in nature. That's the most important thing. Grounding back. So I don't know.
So where can people find you if they would like to book a session with you or follow your journey or watch more of these videos? Where can they find you?
So all my handles on social media are Ropes and Wings. You can find me on my website, ropesandwings.com, to book a session there. And most of my YouTube videos, I got a link in the description to has all my links to every one of my social media and every one of those places to contact me.
Okay, great.
So
Well, thanks.
ropes and wings is all the handles. That's all you need to know.
Yeah, and I'll just remind everyone, my website is higher-heart-healing.com, and my handle is higher heart healing 88 on Instagram for the two infinities. So
Perfect.
so thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for being here, Tony, and sharing your experience, sharing your story. Lots of important information came through for sure, that the viewers can take with them to um, keep navigating this life from a place of empowerment and spiritual warrior.
Hmm.
Yeah. So thank
Absolutely.
you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. It was awesome.
You're
So
welcome.
love you
Okay.
all.
Bye.
Bye.